Each year, the NFL's bottom teams go through a purge of coaches. Most of these take place either during the season or on the date known as Black Monday, while other incompetent organizations will wait until all the good upcoming candidates have already decided on future positions and then fire their incumbents. And every year, the bottom dwellers then hire new saviors of the franchise. The new coaches are always seen as new and refreshing, a big detachment from the previous regime, and they talk different, they act different. They're going to turn this sinking ship around. Now, we all know the truth behind this hopium, and most, if not all, of these coaches will be out of a job within the next 3 to 5 years, and the process then starts all over again for these perpetually bad organizations. Currently, only 8 of the 32 head coaches in the league right now have held their jobs for more than 5 years. Those being the Packers' Matt LaFleur, the 49ers' Kyle Shanahan, the Ravens' Jim Harbaugh, the Chiefs' Andy Reid, the Rams' Sean McVay, the Steelers' Mike Tomlin, the Bengals' Zach Taylor, and the Bills' Sean McDermott. Meaning chances are against these new quote-unquote leaders of men. Some of these new guys come with more pomp and circumstance than others, but in all actuality, they all have positives and negatives attached to them. Each head coach isn't on his own, but I'm also going to look at their staff and how it was constructed. Did they hire a bunch of quote-unquote young and upcoming guys, which comes with its own pros and cons, or did they decide to hire retreads and veterans that have a track record of success in the league? Either way, I'm going to give my 2 cents. Let's start with Mr.
Duval
himself, Liam Coen. His hiring process was unorthodox to say the least, but nonetheless, he is now the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Pros for this guy aren't super hard to find. He has ties to Sean McVay, which you have walked within 50 feet of that man, chances are you're going to get a head coaching job somewhere. He started his NFL journey in 2018 as the assistant wide receivers coach under the chiseled chin himself, and spent 2 years in that position before being switched to the assistant quarterback coach under the same regime. 2021, he became the offensive coordinator for Kentucky and somehow pulled a rabbit out of his hat and milked a good season out of Mr. Mayo himself, Will Levis. In 2022, he returned back to the NFL to be Sean McVay's offensive coordinator, and it didn't go super hot. The Rams offense sputtered, scoring the fewest points in the NFC that year to a 5-12 record. He then returned back to Kentucky in 2023, in which they had an up and down year, finishing 7-6 overall and a measly 3-5 in conference play. After the 2023 season, he returned yet again to the NFL, this time serving as offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, leading the offense and Baker Mayfield to a division win in the playoffs, and a close defeat to eventual NFC runner-up Washington in the divisional round. He's a vagabond. Now, again, a big pro was his proximity to Sean McVay and his track record of decent offenses outside of maybe the 2022 season with the Rams, which really wasn't 100% his fault. They were coming off a Super Bowl win and were decimated by injuries, but he did play a role, obviously, being the offensive coordinator. My cons for him are fairly apparent. He has a mixed track record and hasn't stayed in one job for more than a year since 2021. Also, looking at his coaching staff, kind of scares me if I'm being honest. His OC and DC hires are both first-timers, and while his OC hire isn't really a big deal, seeing as he will more than likely be the play caller for the team, his DC is more of a red flag. If you look at guys around the league, like Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, they hire veteran defensive coordinators with head coaching backgrounds to help them ease into the head coaching scene, and it helped immensely. And both have had good success from it. Not to say first-time defensive coordinators can't work out, because Kyle Shanahan found a gem in Robert Saleh that worked out pretty well. So pros, offensive guy, albeit with a mixed track record with a talented QB, proximity to Sean McVay and a stable of stud coaches, and a decent history working with younger guys and getting the most out of them. His cons, his vagabond coaching lifestyle is a concern. His super awkward press conference, if I'm being honest, was also a red flag. Not purely from the press conference, but his demeanor and personality are big question marks. If you're super awkward or fake, NFL players will sniff that out in an instant, and his super young, inexperienced coordinator hires are also a small red flag. Next up is the new man to kick the can down the road in New Orleans, Kellen Moore. Kellen lands in a fairly difficult situation with the Saints. If his GM Mickey Loomis could build a team as well as he restructures his albatross contracts, the Saints would win the Super Bowl every single year. The Saints are going to have to be a build through the draft team for the next few years, and not by choice. They have no cap space for the next 2 years, meaning if they do land studs in the draft, they can't really afford to sign them if they don't stop procrastinating with the cap issues. Kellen's track record as offensive coordinator is a little confusing and hard to read. He started his NFL coaching career in 2018, fresh off retirement from the league, where he played quarterback. His first head coach mentor was actually Jason Garrett, who promoted him from QB coach to offensive coordinator in 2019. His first year was actually pretty good, averaging 27.1 points a game, with Dak throwing 30 tutties and Zeke running for 1,300 yards and 12 more touchdowns. With an 8-8 record, though, Jason Garrett was promptly fired at the end of the 2019 season, and Jerry Jones hired Packers retread Mike McCarthy to lead the boys. To Kellen's credit, McCarthy retained him for the 2020 season. However, 2020 was not a great season for the Cowboys. Going 6-10 in Mikey's first year, injuries decimated Dallas that first year under McCarthy. However, with players like Travis Frederick, Cameron Irving, Lyle Collins, and Dak missing most of, if not all of the season due to injury, that's just the offense. The defense was missing key cogs as well, but we're going to focus on Kellen, we're not so much the boys. McCarthy let Kellen run the offense that entire year, despite his background as a play caller. It went about as well as it could with Andy Dalton in 2/5 of the starting offensive line, playing the majority of the snaps. In 2021, Kellen retained his offensive play caller role with the Cowboys and had a ton of success with his offense ranking number 1 in points scored, number 1 in TDs, first in overall yards, and Dak throwing 37 tutties and only 10 interceptions in 16 games played, and Elliott running for 10 or more touchdowns and just over 1,000 yards, and leading the boys to a 12-5 record. 2022 was Kellen Moore's final season in Dallas, where he again led them to good success. The Cowboys were third in points, even with Dak only playing 12 games and Cooper Rush having to play in 9. The Cowboys again finished 12-5, eventually falling to the Niners in the playoffs. After the 2022 season, there was a mutual departing between McCarthy and the Cowboys and Kellen. Some say it was partially because of the poor showing against the Niners in the playoffs, in which Dallas only scored 12 points, but there were also other teams calling more about potential head coaching jobs and offensive coordinator roles, where he could have total control over the offense. It also gave McCarthy the opportunity to run his own offense with total control. Kellen wasn't out of a job for long, however, and swiftly landed with the Chargers and Justin Herbert. Coached then by Brandon Staley, the Chargers were an enigma, having tons of perceived talents on both sides of the ball, but never living up to expectations. Staley was on the hot seat to win and win now. Kellen did not have the same success in Los Angeles as he did in Dallas. His offense ranked 21st in points, 18th in yards, 25th in rush yards, 27th in rushing average, and 22nd in first downs. His offense was 9th in passing yards, even with Herbert only playing in 13 games due to injury. The Chargers' defense didn't fare much better, and they went 5-12, leading to an entire coaching regime overhaul, with Kellen being caught up in the fire sale. Again, Kellen wasn't out of a job for long, landing with an NFC contender in Philly. Kellen was given probably the best talent he ever had to work with in his coaching tenure in 2024 with the Eagles, with Philadelphia being stacked at almost every position on offense and the best running back in the league in Saquon Barkley, who came over from the rival Giants in the offseason. In 2024, the Eagles looked darn near unstoppable at times, with the defense dominating most games, being in top 5 in most stats, and Kellen Moore's offense playing perfect complementary football, mainly in the running game, letting Saquon and Jalen Hurts wear down opposing defenses with one of the best offensive lines in football, keeping the top defense fresh. Moore's offense ranked 7th in points, 8th in yards, 2nd in rushing yards, 1st in rushing attempts, while ranking 30th in passing yards and dead last in passing attempts. Some argue that Moore's job was simply to let the talent play and get out of the way, but there have been many a coordinator in the past with plenty of teams that have outsmarted themselves with talent and made everyone around them worse. The 2024 Eagles went on to win a dominating super performance over the then defending champion Chiefs, again led by their top-notch defense and slowly grounding Kansas City to a pulp with their superior running game on offense. So, pros for Kellen Moore. He has been under multiple head coaches, 3 offensive, and has been subject to different talent groups, adjusting each time to run pretty decent offenses. He has history as a QB and player in the league, and it makes it easier to connect with players, in theory. That's not always the case, but there have been reports at previous stops that players appreciated he welcomed their feedback when it came to play calling and coaching. The cons. The biggest con is the organizations he's going to work for. It's a mediocre and middling organization that is one of the worst places to be as an organization. No growth and continuing to do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. His coordinator choices are a tad scary in my opinion. I like the fact he chose a defensive coordinator with a head coaching experience to help him out with his new duties. I don't like the fact that it's Brandon Staley, who has been a mixed bag to say the least as a coordinator and as a head coach. And his offensive coordinator, Doug Nussmeier, is an interesting hire. Not good or bad, just interesting, as Philadelphia really doesn't rely on their QBs to do too much, mostly just ground and pound. Third up, we have the man in Dallas who actually took over for Kellen after you left for the Chargers, and Nepo baby Brian Schottenheimer. And that might be a little harsh and unfair criticism because he can't really control who his dad is or who he was, but nevertheless, his dad played a big role in his come up as an assistant and hired him in a few stops. His dad, of course, being the former coach of the Chargers and Marty Schottenheimer. Past couple coaching candidates, I went through their coaching tenures with a fine-tooth comb and gave you each of their defining stops before becoming head coach. I can't really do that with Brian because this video would be 3 hours long. Just as a brief history, he started his coaching career in 1997 working with teams like the then St. Louis Rams, Chiefs, Syracuse, and USC. His first prominent role in the NFL was with the offensive juggernaut New York Jets. The sarcasm is thick, of course. But he did have success with Chad Pennington and Thomas Jones out of the backfield in 2008 under then coach Eric Mangini. Eric was fired after the 2008 season, and in came Rex Ryan, who actually retained Brian. In 2009 and 2010, the New York Jets made the playoffs and even an AFC championship game, losing to Peyton Manning and the Colts 30-17 in 2009, and Steelers in Big Ben 24-19 in 2010. Things went off the rails after that season, and in 2011, the offensive stumbled to rank 29th in total yards, and Schottenheimer was fired after the 2011 season. From 2012 to 2014, he served as OC for the St. Louis Rams, but he had little to no success with the Sam Bradford-led Rams under Jeff Fisher, who for some reason kept landing head coaching jobs after his flame out in Tennessee. After those 2 tumultuous seasons, he went back to the college game and served as offensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia actually took a step back in 2015 from the previous year, when they averaged 41.3 points a game, down to 26.3 under Brian. The Bulldogs did go 10-3, but Mark Richt was fired after the season and Brian was thrown out with the bathwater. After his college stint, he returned to the NFL to be QB coach for Andrew Luck in Indy, and stayed in that position until 2017. Luck had decent numbers under Brian as his QB coach, and with that success, another NFL team came calling, and he was hired as offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks under Pete Carroll from 2018 to 2020. Seattle had good success with Brian as play caller, and in 2019, Russell Wilson threw for 4,000 yards and 32 touchdowns. And running back Chris Carson ran for 1,230 yards, and the offensive total ranked 8th in total yards per game with 374 and 9th in total points per game and 25.3. In 2020, the offense set the franchise record for 459 points. Even with that success, there was a difference in opinion on offensive philosophy with him and prominent players on offense, and he was let go after the 2020 season. In 2021, he landed the passing game coordinator job in Jacksonville under all-time coaching bust Urban Meyer, and actually called plays for the Jags for the last 4 games, but was fired along with everybody else in the staff after the season. In 2022, he finally landed in Dallas as a consultant for then defensive coordinator Dan Quinn on opposing offenses. In 2023, after Kellen and the Cowboys mutually parted ways, Brian was made offensive coordinator under Big Mike. And the offense did well with him as offensive coordinator, albeit he was not the play caller, as McCarthy took that role back after Moore left. After a good year in 2023 and a rough year in 2024, Mike was fired as head coach and Brian was promoted this past January for sake of continuity, per Jerry Jones. Some view his promotion as a cheap head coaching option for Jerry. Others think this is purely for continuity purposes, as Mr. Jones said, and it's hard as a non-Cowboys fan to look at this anything more than a cheap option. But who knows, maybe Jerry knows what he's doing. So pros for Brian. He has served under many a head coach and can draw from a wealth of knowledge and experience in the league with many different player bases. His offenses have been up and down, but he has gotten a decent bang for his buck when it comes to getting the most out of his talent. I like his hire of Matt Eberflus as defensive coordinator. I believe he is a middle-of-the-road defensive coordinator that can succeed with top-tier talent, but after his tenure with the Bears, I'd be hesitant on taking any head coaching advice from him. Cons. He was an out-of-nowhere hire that really seems to be a cheap option for Jerry. Even though I put this as a pro, his offenses were very hit or miss at his different stops. I still feel like this is a guy who wouldn't be on the radar if it wasn't for his last name. To be fair, the Schottenheimer name used to hold more weight than it does today, since most NFL fans under the age of 25 don't remember his dad or his legendary regular season Charger teams. Next up is one of Brian's many old bosses in Pete Carroll, the new man to take the uphill climb of turning around the Raiders. Pete has been around a while. For gosh sakes, he's 73. He is literally the oldest head coach in NFL history, surpassing Romeo Crennel. So as an early warning, like I did with Brian, I won't be going into fine-tooth detail with Petey. Otherwise, we would be here a very long time. So as a brief overview of his coaching history, he started coaching in 1977 after being a graduate assistant at the University of the Pacific from 1973 to 1976. He then became the defensive backs coach for Arkansas in 1977, Iowa State in 1978, Ohio State in 1979, and North Carolina State from 1980 to 1982. He became the assistant head coach / offensive coordinator at Pacific in 1982, and then he finally moved to the NFL in 1984 as the defensive backs coach for the Buffalo Bills, moving on to the Minnesota Vikings in the same capacity in 1985 to 1989. He then became the defensive coordinator for the New York Jets in 1990 to 1993, serving 1 year as head coach in 1994. After he was fired after the 94 season, he went and became the defensive coordinator in San Fran from 1995 to 1996. He was hired as head coach of the floundering New England Patriots team from 97 to 99 and had some success going 27-21, making the playoffs in 97 and 98, but he did miss the playoffs in 99 and was fired after the season. Some no-name guy took over after he left, but he had moderate success as best. 2001, he took over as the head coach for the USC Trojans, and now we enter into probably the most formative and controversial years as we see him now, all these years later. From 2002 to 2008, he won 7 straight Pac-10 championships, winning the national championship in 03 and 04. Although that championship technically no longer exists due to certain reasons that no longer apply to college football, he won the Rose Bowl in 2007 and 09. He promptly took an NFL head coaching job in 2010 with the Seattle Seahawks. Ironically, right after he left, a bunch of bad stuff came out about his tenure at USC. I'm sure it was pure coincidence on the timing of everything, nothing more. Nevertheless, he took over a middling Seahawks team from Jim Mora, who ironically went on to coach a college football team in California right down the road from USC. Carroll immediately turned the franchise around with some savvy drafting and free agents and immediately won the West his first year, albeit with a 7-9 record in 2010. He missed the playoffs in 2011 with another 7-9 record, and essentially taking flight after the 2011 season, making the playoffs with an 11-5 record in 2012 and winning the Super Bowl in 2013 over the Broncos 43-8. And he also made the Super Bowl again in 2014, losing in controversial fashion with a pass on the last offensive play of the game for the Seahawks at the goal line instead of handing it off to then stud running back Marshawn Lynch. After 14, the Seahawks continued to have success, albeit in a more subdued manner, never making it back to the Super Bowl, but with 5 NFC West division titles, 10 playoff appearances in 13 years, 7 divisional round appearances, and 2 Super Bowl appearances, most franchises would kill for that type of success over a decade, and some of that was with Kyle Shanahan in the same division. He stepped down after the 2023 season, which was originally called a mutual decision, but future reports hinted it really wasn't up to Pete and it was more coming from upper management. He became a senior advisor for the team, and the Seahawks hired Mike Macdonald from the Baltimore Ravens to serve as their new commander-in-chief on the coaching staff. He was hired by the Raiders after the Raiders were spurned by Ben Johnson after a ton of chatter saying that Ben Johnson to the Raiders was a done deal, instead taking the Bears job. More on that later. So pros, this guy has a ton of experience and success as a head coach. He gets along with his players for the most part and knows how to push the right buttons and get a ton out of his players, especially on defense with his Legion of Boom serving as a good example. He has a ton of networking ability. After being in coaching for as long as he has, he knows virtually everyone or everyone knows who he is. He knows how to build a culture and cement a locker room. This guy had some characters on the Seahawks, and he did a pretty good job keeping it all together for as long as he could. Cons. His age cannot be overlooked. And I'm not a big anti-age guy, but how long is he going to continue? Did management go over a potential succession plan? Is he willing to discuss such things? Some coaches have massive egos and won't broach the subject of failure or what the future looks like. Others are introspective and nuanced and have enough self-realization that things might not work out the way they plan. Is Pete a guy like that? I have no idea. I don't know him personally, but I would like to think so. And even if he does have a solid succession plan, losing head coaches can be jarring for players, especially if they are well liked in the locker room. It can be tough for the new guy to come in and win guys over. Even if they are professionals, they're still human beings with emotions and free thought. Fifth up is Aaron Glenn. And to be completely honest, getting this far in my script, I completely forgot how many head coaches were hired this offseason. Almost a third of the league fired and hired head coaches. And some could argue that teams like the Giants and maybe the Steelers, at least Steelers fans seem to think so, should have moved on from their regimes as well. But enough with that tangent. Aaron Glenn. Aaron played defensive back in the league for 14 years from 94 to 2008. He's starting his career on the Jets from 94 to 01, spending 3 seasons in Houston from 2002 to 2004, 2 years in Dallas from 05 to 06, and 1 year in Jacksonville in 07, and finally finishing his career in 2008 in New Orleans with Sean Payton. Over his career, he amassed 205 games played, 41 interceptions, 6 interceptions returned for touchdowns, 5 forced fumbles, 102 passes defended, which wasn't even a stat until 98. So who actually knows his legitimate number? 134 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, which again wasn't a stat until 99. 1994 Defensive Rookie of the Year and 3-time Pro Bowl. This man had a pretty solid career. Not Hall of Fame worthy in my opinion, but Hall of Very Good at least. He actually started his coaching/front office career in the UFL as general manager of the Houston Stallions in 2012. After that, he joined the Jets as a personnel scout. In 2013, he switched to college area scout, and finally in 2014, he was able to land an on-field position with the team as assistant defensive backs coach for the Browns. In 2015, he became the assistant secondary coach/cornerbacks, which look, these teams have so many different positional coaches now, it's really hard to tell what each of these guys actually do and with who, but that was his title according to my research. The Browns struggled in 14 and 15, and he went to the Saints in 16 as defensive backs coach, no assistant title this time. From 2017 to 2020, he served as secondary coach under Sean Payton, and the team had good success going 56 and 24 in that span. After 2020, he was offered and hired as defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions under serial kneecap biter Dan Campbell, and he had moderate success with that talent he was given that was on the field. In 2021, his first year, Lions ranked 31st in points allowed per game with 27.5, 28 in 2022 with 25.1, and in 2023 they ranked 23rd with 23.2 points per game, and in 2024 they jumped all the way up to 7th place with 20.1 points allowed per game. Those numbers aren't exactly eye-popping, but considering the lack of talent he had to work with his first year and the amount of injuries that fell to the team in 2024, it is a small miracle that he had as much success as he did with the team. Now, this write-up on Aaron Glenn may seem shorter than others, but the fact is he only had one stop as an actual coordinator before landing his new head coaching job with the Jets. And that's not a knock on him, but in 12 years he went from UFL GM to defensive coordinator, and only 4 of those years did he call plays or lead any side of the ball with moderate success. Pros. He milks every last drop of talent out of his players that he possibly can. If this season showed anything, it showed that. He's a no-nonsense guy and seems like he isn't afraid to tackle tough situations with a tough demeanor. That might seem like a superfluous observation, but in New York, the media landscape, that is imperative. He was around a good stable of head coaches as an assistant and coordinator in Sean Payton and Dan Campbell. Say what you want about Dan, but the man wins. And his players seem to feed off him and want to play hard and gritty. If Aaron can bring that to New York, it would be a steal for the franchise. He has a limited scouting background and front office history, even if it was the UFL. And I do like his hire defensive coordinator in Steve Wilkes, who has a lot of history and success in the league. Cons. He's a defensive guy. If you haven't noticed, the majority of the candidates hired this offseason were offensive guys, and for a good reason. Out of the past 10 Super Bowls, winning coaches, 8 of them were offensive guys, and the other guy was Bill Belichick with Tom Brady. It's an inconvenient truth with a lot of head coaches now that the majority of the success is from the offensive guys. Not saying guys like Dan Quinn and Sean McDermott can't find success, but the numbers show it's an offensive league. He has a very short coordinator history, although the fact he served under an offensive guy in Dan Campbell meant that he more than likely had total control over that side of the ball, but it's still a little scary. His offensive coordinator role scares me at least a little bit. Tanner Engstrad did serve under Ben Johnson and saw firsthand the success he had and learned under him, but he's still a first-time offensive play caller under a first-time defensive head coach. The final 2 guys on this list were seen as the big tunas, the white whales of the offseason. Now, whether that means they will have more or less success than the aforementioned guys, it's impossible to tell, but these 2 basically held the keys to the lock on the coaching carousel, as soon as these 2 were off the board, that coaching hirings really seemed to take off. First of the 2 big catches is prodigal son Mike Vrabel. Now, those of you under the age of 25 might not remember Mike on those Pats defenses in the early 2000s, but he was a really solid player. He actually started his career in 1997 with the Pittsburgh Steelers and didn't see the field much, appearing in 41 games with the Steelers with no starts to his name. After 2000, he signed with the Pats and played there from 2001 to 2008, where thereafter he signed with the Chiefs and spent 2 years there, eventually calling it a playing career in 2010. 13 years in the league, he played 206 games with 140 starts, 11 interceptions, 1 career interception return for a touchdown, 41 passes defended, 19 forced fumbles, and 9 fumbles recovered. He amassed 762 total tackles and 63 tackles for loss, along with 41 QB hits, which weren't even a stat until 2006. In 2007, he was a Pro Bowler, first-team All-Pro, and got 5th place for the Defensive Player of the Year, his only honors he received as a player. He was one of those guys that Patriots were notorious for acquiring, an underwhelming player, and making them into at least a solid, if not very good player. In 2011, the year after his retirement, he went back to his alma mater and served as the linebackers coach in Ohio State. In 2012, he switched to defensive line coach, and in 2013, he served in the same role under Urban Meyer. In 2014, he got his opportunity to go back to the NFL as linebackers coach for the Houston Texans, under Bill O'Brien, who knew him from his Patriots days there. He stayed there until 2017 when he got the promotion to defensive coordinator. For his 1 year at DC, his defense was mediocre at best, ranking 20th in allowed yards per game and last in points per game in 27. Even with that mixed bag as defensive coordinator, he landed a head coaching job with the Tennessee Titans in 2018. In 2018, the Titans went 9-7, the exact same record as the year before. But in 2019, they again went 9-7, but this time it was enough to make the playoffs, and they even snuck into the AFC Championship game where they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. In 2020, they went 11-5 and made the playoffs, this time falling in the first round, and it was the same story the following year in 2021, with the team now going 12-5 in the new 17-game schedule, only to fall in the first round again. The next 2 seasons were tumultuous. and the team went 7-10 in 2022 and 6-11 in 2023, which led to the surprising firing of Mike. Not a lot of people saw the firing coming, but later reports stated some friction between Vrabel and upper management. The fall of the Tennessee Titans in the last 2 years can't all be put on Mike. There are many stories coming out about the difference in opinion and decisions made, especially with the A.J. Brown trade. In 2024, he served as a consultant for the Cleveland Browns, and after the 2024 season, he was swiftly hired by his past employer, the New England Patriots. Again, the write-up on Vrabel is going to be shorter than some of these other candidates, mainly because of his lack of coordinator experience outside of his 1 year in Houston. There just aren't a lot of stats and figures I can provide with him in charge of one side of the ball. Pros: he is a proven commodity and is well known to get the most out of his players if they buy into his hard-nosed atmosphere. He sets the groundwork of expectations and sets a solid culture that his players can buy into. He is landing in a very good spot with the Patriots and has capital to make sweeping changes in his image, which started in earnest in free agency, not to mention a young, talented, and moldable quarterback in Drake May. Cons: again, he's a defensive guy, and it's the same reasons as Aaron Glenn, and I don't like his offensive coordinator hiring in Josh McDaniels. Maybe it's just recency bias with the stuff he has pulled in the past with other organizations, but letting him guide and mold a young QB is a little unnerving from the outside looking in. Last on the list is the man that multiple organizations were seeking out for the last 2 years in Ben Johnson, the newest wonderkin, the newest savior in Chicago. Ben played QB for the University of North Carolina as a third stringer from 04 to 08. After graduating, he left football and worked as a software designer in North Carolina for the company L Telenext. In 2009, he started coaching at the University of Boston College as an offensive graduate assistant until 2010. In 2011, he became the tight ends coach. In 2012, he made this trek to the NFL as offensive assistant for the Miami Dolphins under Joe Philbin. In 2013, he was promoted to assistant QB coach. In 2015, he was promoted again to tight ends coach after Joe Philbin was fired and Dan Campbell took over as interim head coach. After 2015, Adam Gase was hired as head coach and retained Ben Johnson as assistant wide receiver coach and eventually the wide receiver coach in 2018. In 2019, he went to Detroit as offensive quality coach under then Lions coach Matt Patricia. The following year, in 2020, he was promoted to tight ends coach, and after the staff was jettisoned in Detroit, he was retained by his past boss, Dan Campbell, who got the full-time coaching gig in 2021. He was promoted from tight ends coach to passing game coordinator the same year after the current offensive coordinator, Anthony Lynn, was stripped of all play-calling duties after the team started 0-8. Ben was promoted to offensive coordinator 2022 and immediately turned around a subpar offense. The offense in 2021 was 22nd in total yards with 5,484, 25th in points scored with 325, 19th in rushing yards with 1886, and 15th in passing yards with 3884. The first year of Ben Johnson calling plays and running the offense, the Lions ranked 3rd in total yards with 6,460, 5th in points scored with 453, 11th in rushing yards with 2,179, and 7th in passing yards with 4,440. The team went 9-8 and narrowly missed the playoffs. After the 2022 season, the Carolina Panthers had a lot of interest in hiring Ben Johnson as their head coach, but he instead went back to the Lions in 2023 and again spearheaded the offense. In 2023, the Lions ranked 3rd in yards with 6,712, 5th in points with 461, 5th in rushing yards with 2,311, and 4th in passing yards with 4,608. Again, after the season, multiple teams were heavily pursuing Ben Johnson as a head coaching candidate, with the Commanders famously flying Ben out to woo him, only for him to have a change of heart and decline their reputation. Staying with the Lions for the 2024 season. In 2024, the Ben and the Lions offense posted their best averages in totals to date, ranking 1st in points scored in 564, 2nd in yards with 6,962, 6th in rushing yards with 2,488, 2nd in passing yards with 4,718. All the success wasn't just on Ben, he did play a big part in it. He was also surrounded by excellent assistant coaches that got the most out of their individual groups, along with an influx of elite talent, especially at the offensive line position. After the 2024 season, Ben was hired by the Chicago Bears after being wooed by the Raiders and Jags briefly. Pros: his offensive track record over the past 3 seasons can't be dismissed. He took a middling group from 2021 and turned the entire offense into a top 5 offense in less than a full season. He's entering a very solid situation in Chicago with young QB Caleb Williams and some young, talented playmakers on both sides of the ball. His hiring of Dennis Allen as his defensive coordinator was key, as he has a previous head coaching experience to bounce ideas off of and to get a good understanding on the ins and outs of the head coaching world. Cons. Outside of those 3 years, there isn't much to go off for track record. The success of his teams prior to the Lions was mediocre, and it's hard to tell how much real sway he had on any of that. He was blessed with a wealth of talent in Detroit, especially on the offensive line. He can't bring that to Chicago. How is he with bringing in new talent and developing outside of the excellent staff in Detroit? To summarize, none of us have any idea how any of these coaching hires will work out. And anyone that does is lying straight to your face. And you don't need that type of negativity in your life. Most of the franchises named above are constant cellar dwellers, and most of the time there needs to be more than just a change at the coaching position in order to facilitate actual change. Maybe one or two of these guys pull a rabbit out of his hat and turns around these sinking ships, but the odds are against them.